Ow!
Have you ever watched someone do something and wonder how they managed to complicate it as much as they did? Take this for example.
Shut up. I'm only programmed to work that way, okay?
Alright, come here. Watch. Whoa! None of this is twisting and flipping and...
For this project, I purchased 104 board foot of 8/4 hickory. I spent most of the morning rearranging the materials, trying to decide the best way to use and display what I have. Throwing the boards together without care won't get you something cohesive, so take the extra time and make it pretty. After we know what our faces are, I rough cut things to length. I got all my table pieces, I got my breadboard ends. I used some hard maple I had here and here to do the table aprons, the bench aprons. Over here, we got the bench top, 3 bench pieces and the breadboard ends for that. And here's what's left. First, we're going to joint an edge so we can run it on the table saw to get everything under 6 inches. If you don't mill materials in the right order, you won't get straight flat boards with 90-degree corners, which is important. My jointer is a key part of this, and it only takes boards as wide as 6 inches, so all materials got to be reduced to 6 inches, milled, and then reassembled. Do you see this here? This is a perfect example of unseen tension and why you should always purchase 10 to 20% more materials for your project. Wood is a living thing, or at least it used to be, and you can't always predict what it's going to do once you start using it.
Here's a nice piece of wood, and you can see this split. It runs all the way down to about here. That means that this entire section here can't be used. We are ripping these boards on the table saw and then the bandsaw to reduce their size. So the thickness of these boards at finish is going to be 1 3/8 inch, which is right here. Now I could take this to my planer and I would have to send them through pass after pass, 30-second at a time, to remove all this material, and that's just waste. So we stepped it over just a little bit to leave this little tail so that we have room to plane it down to its final thickness. And then when we run it through the table saw, we're left with 3/16 to 1/4 inch of a piece left. An extra step that's helped saving some materials as well as saving the use on my planer. Planing, jointing, woodworking creates a lot of dust, a lot of sawdust, and it has to go somewhere and I gotta do something with it. So that's from this thing. And then I got my trash can over here, which is all from the jointer, and I will show you where this stuff goes. Luckily for me, I've got some small piece of property that has a nice hidden area behind the shed. Been dumping sawdust here for a while, so most projects will go through, depending on their size, I'll fill up a couple bags and a couple cans. And that's where it goes. We've got them to their final thickness now and laid out the way they're going to be assembled. Got to glue up these pieces and then cut them to length, then do the tenons and the breadboards and all that other bullshit. So that's where we are. After getting the table glued up, instead of sanding it all myself by hand, we found a local cabinet making shop to take the tabletop to and run it through a wide belt sander. If you didn't know, hickory is a very hard material, and sanding it myself with a little 5-inch sander was going to take hours. This is a large 42-inch wide belt sander which you can put a variety of different grit belts in. We started with, I believe, an 80 or 100 and moved up to a 150 by the time we were done.
We made it back. We were there for about 45 minutes. I don't know, time. It's like an hour or two, hour and a half, 2 hours in total. Cost me $50. The top has been done to 150. The bottom was done at 80. Right now I've got my lines marked out. I'm going to chop off the ends, cut it to its final length, and then I'm going to rip it down lengthwise, and I'm going to leave it a half-inch proud. That way I can put the breadboards on and then rip it once it's finally done. So I have my template set out. These are going to be the 3 tenons. I have my dowels marked. Now these are going to be, oh, what's the word for it? Pull, bore, pull, something like that. Alright, here's what we're working with. So these are our breadboard ends, and we have to clear out a significant portion of it. So if you could imagine, table runs this way, breadboard end is going to sit here. It has to accept these tenons as well as this 1-inch part. So if you're going to be doing this type of mortise work with a router, get yourself an up spiral bit. So traditionally, this is what you think of when you think about, traditional cutting router. Straight shank, 1/2 inch, 2.5 inch long blade. And as you get further and further, those chips are just bunching up because they have nowhere to go. All it's doing is pushing it around in a circle. An upcut spiral bit, because it has these flutings here, it helps to carry material up and out of the hole, making your work a lot easier. Also, be sure to keep your bits clean. End of mine, it's a little dirty, and that is going to lead to burning, which is no bueno. It's on fire. In woodworking, there are a lot of ways to accomplish the exact same task. So for instance, we have our 3 tenons here, and we have this center section that's waste, and there's a lot of ways that you can remove it. I have a oscillating multi-tool here, and I just, you know how that works. I clear out enough space so that I can get my saw in there. Oh, so squeaky. I'll tell you that. There's plenty of woodworking that involves problem solving. I have a mortising machine, as you saw earlier, and it fits this height just fine. I can go ahead and mortise these without any problems. They come out damn near finished. Just a little bit of cleanup at the bottom, but they're ready to go. However, these are entirely too tall, so they don't fit. So we drill out a majority of our holes, and I went ahead and made this little jig, and it'll fit on one side and then flip it over on that side. And ta-da! All right, now rinse and repeat 7 more times. All right, now that our mortises are all cleaned out, it's time to do the tenons for our rails. I generally find it's best to do the thickness first so that you fit in the mortise. Then you'll do the top part so that you are flush with the top of the leg and that you fit where you want, and then you'll creep up on the bottom. I think when I turned my blade off, it caused my table to shake, where that vibration came in and offset my blade. So now I've got some shoulders I have to adjust on this piece. So we're just going to lower the blade underneath. When you are cutting all the way around, it's good on these 2 edges to set it up so that you have a little lip left. You can see right there, got a little bit on each side. The reason for this is you can easily clean this up with a chisel, but if you make this cut and then you cut into this surface down here, you're gonna have this gap right here. You're gonna cut right here, and it's going to be a lower height here than it is here, and you're just going to chase this line around and around and around. So do your 2 sides the same, and then leave a little bit on each of your other ends. In order to make assembly a little easier, you can break your edges on your tenons so that they're not so sharp. Always test fit everything before you start moving on. I use some blocks to protect the surfaces because I don't want to put clamping pressure. Clamps tend to get dirty or get spots on them, and if you don't cover up your ends and you clamp it too hard, you could end up with damage on your pieces. So. You can see the original pinhole I marked and 2 scribe lines up higher. This is how the drawbar works. You move the hole on the tenon closer to the center of the table, offsetting it slightly so that when you insert the dowel, it creates a pulling effect on the breadboard end. After drilling all the holes and putting the breadboard back on the table, you can see the small lip on the inside of the bottom edge of the hole, right about there. The other important aspect of this type of install is accounting for wood movement. The center tenon and dowel holes are glued and fixed in place, but the outside tenons are not. This is so the table can expand and contract with the seasons, but because dowels in general are fixed points, you have to elongate the holes on the side outwards so that the dowel can move back and forth within the tenon so that the table can continue to expand and contract while still being fully assembled. So you can see me fighting these holes here with a hand file just to make sure that I have enough space so that the dowels can wiggle around instead of being fixed in place. If you've made it this far, obviously I've done something right. Either the build's interesting or my content's entertaining. And if you haven't already done so, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button. There's going to be plenty more content to come, and I'd love to have you on this journey of mine. If you would like to assist in this, hitting that like button and leaving a comment would also be fantastic. I'd love to hear what you think.
of a bitch. Alright, let's make a template. So I've got my template piece here. I have my bendy stick that's going to help me mark everything out. I've taken the measurements, so the standoff from the edge, my center line measurement, my other one, and I've scribed them onto our two templates. So this is the smaller one, there's the end and end. I have, to make this as accurate as possible, I've measured my bendy stick, and I've marked a center line for it. I've aligned the center line with the center line here. I've clamped it down, and I've also equally spaced that end and this end the same as the center, so I know that it's straight. And then what I'm gonna do is, because it is clamped there and there, I'll get no flex except for from the clamping point to right here. So all I'm gonna do is bring this over until it touches that line, and then I'm going to trace on this side of my piece, because right there is where the line starts. Ow! This is a flush trim saw, which is different than one of these saws. Now, the reason it's a flush trim saw is because all the teeth are perfectly in line with the blade, versus a majority of regular saws, the teeth are skewed out every other tooth away from the blade. So if you put this on top of a surface and pull back, you're going to scratch up the surface with all the teeth. This is made specifically for doing just that. It also happens to be very flexible so that you can saw in certain places.
My time lapse didn't work, so I'm sorry you missed all the fun, but there it is. Time to move on to the final steps for this bench. Okay, so we've got 4 coats of paint. It's a slow, steady build up to get a nice clean finish. Now we're going to do some final hand sanding with some 180 and some 220. We'll start with a 220 and see how that goes. That's to get everything cleaned up. Then we move on to the distressing part using this thing. So this is a sanding flap wheel. It's comprised of all these little strands. This is what it looks like brand new. All clumped up together, and then as you use them, they spread out. And the nice thing is it lets you move into contours to get sanding in certain spots, but this is also a great way to distress the furniture so that you're removing just a slight amount. This is 220. It gives you a lot of control to remove paint in a very slow and even way while still leaving a nice finish behind. When you're distressing furniture, it can be real easy to get overzealous with other methods and take off too much paint, and then you end up having to recoat. I found this is the easiest way to sand, especially in the grooves. And let's get to it. I think I might work on this side, just so I have better lighting. Lighting is super crucial, especially at this point, because you need to be able to see any imperfections. Now, milk paint doesn't by itself need a top coat or anything to cover it up in low traffic areas. The legs on a bench would certainly qualify for that. I, however, like to protect the paint, so I like to use beeswax, in particular feed and wax beeswax. The beeswax orange oil combination, the nice thing about it is it gives it kind of this nice little luster to it, helps provide just a little bit more of a aged look. This is kind of a dull finish, helps bring that satin up a little, and just overall I think has a really nice look. Also smells really nice. Another important thing to pay close attention
attention to is you want a nice smooth surface, you want to sand everything, but when you're working you want to pay attention to the places that people put their hands on. If you've got areas that are just uncomfortable to touch, meaning that they're not smooth or they're really sharp, you can leave some places like that. So for instance, this top section will be sharp because the bench is going to go on top. Nothing's going to be touching hand-wise this top surface, but underside, people are going to be grabbing it to slide the bench in and out. They'll grab this, they'll grab the bench. So it's a good idea to pay attention to those parts and always be extra cognizant of where people put their hands, because using the furniture is part of owning it, and that needs to be just as much a pleasant experience as it being well made and nice to look at. Now, as your pieces clog up, you can go ahead and hose them off with an air hose to remove some of this material, and it will help extend the life of your sanding pads. Steps. So this is the surface. We sanded at 120, water popped, sanded at 150, water popped, sanded at 180, water popped, sanded at 180 again. We did a table examination with a light, looking for imperfections, filling in any little spots. We are going to finish our final sanding.
What you doing?
I'm putting some straps on.
Oh. Kinky.
Strap on. Today was a day. Find my trailer hitch because it was either stolen, which was less likely, or lost, more likely. And so I borrowed the neighbor's. Then I went to go pick up the trailer so that this wouldn't have to be a perfected game of Tetris. And my trailer lights don't work, so they wouldn't rent me the equipment. So that's fun there. And I went to go get it fixed, and there was an accident. Dude flipped his car. So I ran out and talked to him and helped him and waited for EMS to show up. Now we're gonna load this up and deliver it finally. Which will be great because it'll free up some space that we can continue our work preparing for something else that we're not ready for.
Which is?
A trade show.
Yay!
By the time you see this, we'll have come and gone.